Today's guest is Thomas LaMay from DPR Construction. So, Thomas, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. It's an honor.
Yeah, no,
And I say it's an honor because of the former guests that you've had on this platform. There's some names or people who I dearly respect. So thank you for having me on. Seriously.
well, thank you for making the time.
Yeah. Awesome.
Now, we were just chatting about, you said you used to be someone that was kind of sitting in the background, sort of not contributing, and then you've made your way to the front, sort of commenting and leading, and what sort of caused that change?
Wow. It's a series of events. I will plug the story in long form is if you go to learnings and missteps, there's like 8 episodes where Jesse and I tell that story. But it is a time when I was kind of middle of the road employee. I was working as a superintendent on a project in San Francisco, downtown San Francisco, and I was curious about what was happening, and this would have been in 2000, kind of early 2010, maybe. And I was curious about this notion of lean construction, but I didn't know much about it. And the company I worked for at the time, very traditional mindset. They've since changed as well, but at the time it was very traditional mindset. So like it was like, nah, like that's not that important. So, but there was a book that I was on a desk. It hadn't been read. It was definitely crisp, but the book was The Goal by Eli Goldratt. And it's written. If you don't know the book, it's a novel, so it has chapters and characters, but it introduces this theory of constraints. And I also struggle with a mental illness called anxiety. Before I read that book, and kind of there's some really deep lessons in there, I thought I was crazy. So I was like interested in uh, like measuring time and distance, or looking at like doing like time and motion study just for productivity, and then also to help me make decisions in planning. But when I read that book, I'm like, there's something greater here. This is this is game changing. And I started to actually run this similar experiments that are in that book. And there's a hike. There's a couple chapters about a hike where there's Boy Scouts in a hike, and they're hiking through the woods, and they're having all kinds of problems because of all kinds of variation that even in a nature walk you have to be very diligent on managing your constraints, and managing like how outside things like weather or darkness or whatever impact whatever you're doing. And that if you take a systematic approach to things, you can actually design better ways to execute the work. And then when you learn from those constraints, or whatever you want to call them, those learnings, you apply those back into your work, and it keeps making it better. So it has this feedback and reinforcing loops. That I've just been starting to apply ever since. And now, that's, what is it, 15 years later, I'm a leader, operational leader. My focus in my role is quality and construction quality, but I cover the Southeast region for DPR Construction, and it's about 2 billion a year kind of business unit or region, I guess you'd say.
Yeah,
So it's it's been quite the ride for sure.
yeah, for
But
sure.
so when I started to apply that, my working and kind of like getting promoted really accelerated, and also my earnings really accelerated, and then also like personal life and learning also, like I got obsessed with reading books and getting this up. So it was kind of that moment
Yeah.
that when I picked up that book and then started applying things, that's when a lot of change happened. So hopefully,
Yeah, you just touched on reading and stuff like that, but we can talk about the work, the construction project side of things. But I feel like you applied this, you said reading books, but into your personal side. How
mhm.
did it? Give me some specific examples of how you applied this and the improvements you saw.
Okay, so you know how I said you have to have two things: a feedback loop and a reinforcing loop. So a reinforcing loop would be or reinforcing effect would be like you do something and then you build upon that, and if your reinforcement is better, it keeps it's like it builds upon itself. So it's
Mhm.
reinforcing. It's like putting rebar in concrete. So in your personal life, one thing is like, hey, I need to improve the way I communicate with my with my family and friends and loved ones. So literally, I am very conscious about how we communicate, and it's hard. It's really hard to to do that, but that's the first thing that you can do is build your reinforcing loops, and then the other half is like you have to get feedback. So in your personal life, feedback will show up in many ways. In many ways, and a person who really kind of impacts me and taught me a lot about that was Jennifer Lacey, but she brought this concept that says it's clutter. So if you have a system of feedback and you start to see clutter around you, people are angry, messy dishes in the kitchen or whatever it is, that those are indicators that there's something not right. So then it's like then it's like, hey, let's take care of that and then spend our energy on the things that give us feedback. So it's not like I have to guess anymore. Like I'll ask for feedback, be like, "How am I doing with my communication with you?" And then my loved one, Angeline, will be like, "You need to improve this." And so we've done that. And then the second thing was uh, your day to day life. Your day to day life. We have to do things, but if we take the things and only keep them in our brain, and it's like I got to go to the doctor, I need a dentist appointment, we got to take the dog to the park or to the daycare, or you have kids and they have events, so we're constantly having all this planning stuff. We have to have a way to visualize that. So we built this board and it's based on the Scrum framework. It has the columns of to do, doing, and done. And if you put those things up there and you talk about those things, it's like, okay, you got to do this. There is, I like to call it smart compromise. It's like, okay, you go to the grocery store and then I will go in the backyard and clean up the dog poo. So I have a sticky note, and I'm not even kidding. Pick up dog poo, and you think that's silly, but if you put all of the things that you do in all of your events and the things that which are really important to you, and then the things that are not important, they just fall away. And then it's like not like they disappear, but it's like if you're having that reinforcing effect, I'm going to put all this stuff on here, and we're going to once a week make sure it's up to date and take the stuff off that's old and move stuff into done because that feels good to do. Um, it has that organizing effect and that your undesirable things or those things in which you don't want to talk about, they either go away or you put them on the board and you have to talk about it. You're forced into it. So I think that's those are two things that you can do. Build a scrum board in your kitchen.
Yeah, and now so for the work side, you said some of these organizations you work with didn't do it, they are doing it now, and obviously when you're working in an organization that's large, not everyone's on board. So how do you approach trying to institute learning and change?
This is what we were just so I was just in a meeting talking about this. We are engaging with some projects with a new set of software management tools that none of us at DPR have used before. It's brand new. There's resistance to that because it's like, hey, I'm very successful and I have the proof that I have a high performing project. And the last one didn't utilize all of these new tools and these new methods. And Thomas, even though you say that it's a better way or it's more efficient or it'll save me time and it helps us organize our work, I don't trust you. And people don't say that. They don't say that. We have some talented people, hardworking, super smart. I work with PhDs, but people are human beings, and human beings are animals. And animals, that's been studied, that bias comes into play, and it clouds our brain up. And one form of kind of mental challenging thing that you have to get over is fear. And fear is it's threat, right? So it's like I have to gauge what the threat level is. So not everything is a threat when you deal with fear, but complex systems are scary. So our brains are hardwired to take a complex system and make it more simple or protect ourselves. So it'd be like, I'm going to utilize part of the system, that the part that I like or that I understand. I'm not going to use the whole, all the different modules of this software platform. I'm only going to use two, because I'm okay with that. This is simple. I know how to do it. This is works, right? So that's one form of the other one. The other one is, I'll push back and I'll push away. So you have to navigate that as a leader. You have to navigate that, and I think that's true for almost anything. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's good. Now, so you're right now you're in a position where you have the software, you've done the vetting, right?
Mhm.
Your words, you feel that what they're telling you is people don't trust you, but let's flip it over. I mean, what happens when someone comes to you, Thomas, and say, Thomas, I have a great idea. I'm sure a lot of people come to you with ideas. How does it need to be presented or packaged or staged for you to properly evaluate? Because I'm sure people come to you with the next great idea all the time.
Oh, all the time, all the time, and there's amazing ones out there. What's really important, and especially my role, I'm in construction quality, so that means almost every aspect of our work, from pre-construction to warranty work. We're dealing with managing with owners, making decisions, and like making sure that that valve is calibrated properly. So it's very broad. So if that's a very broad subject, there's all kinds of new and shiny ways to do things. But here, so what we consider, I guess what I consider is like whatever the new, maybe it's even a technological way over a manual step, it has to be exponentially better. It can't just be like a little bit better. And two, so that's so so if it is truly innovative, meaning like it is not even a iteration, it's a true innovation, like laser scanning or reality capture. Why that's so important? Because you can't do that manually. We can only look at our eyeballs, and then we can't like take the picture and store that, and then also have it in 3 dimensions and be able to kind of use all those points. So that's why reality capture is innovative, and we're interested in it. But just a method of moving information around. The second I leave whatever I'm doing data input, if I have to leave that place and go to another place, even though that second place might be faster, I've now introduced variation. And you've had Felipe, engineer Enriquez on. He talked a lot about, or you guys talked a lot about when you introduce variation. any kind of variation leads to all kinds of trouble. So what we like to do, what a manual step, let's say just like a submittal process, where you have product data and you look at it, and I'm pantomiming holding a piece of paper, and I review it with my eyes, and I say, yes, this matches the specifications. I'm going to forward this on to a building designer, and they're going to validate that that I also validated. That process has been done a lot, and now what we've done is just taken that process and digitized it. We haven't even fixed the problem. The problem is, why should we even have to do product data validation to begin with? It's because we don't trust each other. So I'm like, what about trust? Is would be the innovation. So those kinds of things. So it's, if we're just speeding up existing process, it has to be exponentially faster and better and build trust. Meaning like we can remove um, some of the manual processing steps of validation. So like your facial recognition on your phone, that's that's why we like that, or SSO, single sign on, because it hands off those trust. It's digital trust handing off. So that's why DocuSign and Textura, if you've heard those two platforms, they've kind of integrated into our work because it's that handoff of trust. It's the way we authorize payments and authorize contracts, and we can do that digitally because now it's all encrypted and things like that. So that's
Yeah.
kind of a long-winded answer, but
No, it's good.
the kind of the core fundamental is, it either has to be exponentially better or it has to increase trust.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. So you talked about trust. Trust is required when you're doing billions of dollars of construction projects,
Mhm.
which could lead to stress and mental health stuff. So talk to me about that because I know you're passionate about that.
It is, and I'm not alone. We talked, and last week in the construction industry was safety week, where we very consciously stop our work. So we were stopping a lot of work, and we stand down and we say, hey, we're going to have a lot of focused either workshops or trainings, or just an open conversation about health and safety on construction projects, not in office, not in cyberspace, but actually on physically boots on the ground. So we with the industry talked about that, and we spent an entire day just about mental health. And you know how I talked about fear? Fear comes in many forms, and in construction is unique. It's unique kind of way of doing work because it's not like anything else. Industrial work is very similar, but the temporary nature of building construction or bridges or railroads or whatever it is, it's outside in the elements, and it's risky. There's risk involved. It's dirty. You're working at height. You work at edges. You work with high voltage.
Yeah.
So you have to
Lots of
protect yourself.
variations.
Yes, yes, you have to protect yourself. So what I talk about is you also have to protect your energy. So if you expend all of your energy at work, so it's like I have a really stressful job and I got to protect myself, and I have to read these contracts, and I have to I have to walk the job site in a very inefficient manner, and the toilets situation, they're dirty and gross. So at even at my most private moment, I'm like bombarded with smells and graffiti. Right. So all of that requires you to expend energy either to protect yourself or to avoid it or to deal with it. So if there's a lot of it and there's a lot of variation, meaning like our work is very inefficient because it's still stick built, and then there's lots of errors and defects that go along with our work. It's just the nature of our work. So if you have to expend all of your energy on that, at the end of the day, you are very exhausted, physically and mentally. And so you have to travel home now. And if you're physically and emotionally and mentally depleted, there's not much time for you to have a personal life. And in our work, the temporary nature of it, you can't get into a pattern of self help, like being like I can work out regularly or I go to the gym or like so you have so it's even harder to have wellness because of just the nature because for 6 months I might be working 10 miles from my house, and then the next 6 months I might be working 25 miles, and I'm here in Atlanta, and 25 miles could mean an hour in sitting in traffic. So now I have to get to that work on time because we start 7 a.m. or earlier. I now have to remove part of my sleep, so and then so there's all kinds of studies about mental wellness and physical wellness and sleep. So the only thing, if I'm stuck, if I'm working late, I'm mentally depleted, and the work is very inefficient, and I have to get to work earlier, and I have to wake up an hour earlier. The only thing I can do is work harder, like work my body harder, work my brain harder, and work, be emotionally barren because I have to protect myself because of all the micro cuts that happen in construction that it builds year over year, year over year. It's like I was telling Jesse, it's like like in a cave, there's the stalactites and the stalagmites. It's because year over year that calcium builds up, and in your mind, if you can't get out of that, it's a serious problem, and it causes all kinds of mental illnesses and mental injuries. And so I think if we need to start talking about that and say it's normal to feel this way, it's completely acceptable to say I need a mental wellness day or I just need a day off. And then also, it's okay to take that day off or even a week off and to rest and to get out of that self injury cycle that we all put ourselves into. And so we were talking last week that like it's no longer acceptable to just grind it out and to just work harder. And in the book, The Goal, that's that cycle of the only thing you can do is work harder. There's the Herbie chapter. There's a character called Herbie, and he's on that hike. And the only thing that Herbie can do that he can do by himself is work harder. But by working harder, it raises his heart rate. And if he's on a 10-mile hike and your heart rate spikes in the middle of it, you get your energy is depleted. But that's the only thing that Herbie could do, except the best thing that happened in Herbie, and I will spoiler the story, is there was a whole bunch of stuff in Herbie's backpack, right? And it was weighing him down. And they were like, Herbie, let me look in your backpack. And Herbie's like, no, this is mine. This is my backpack, right? And that is a very similar thing that happens in construction because it's a very male and masculine thing to do, be like no, I'm gonna ruck up, right? So but what they had to do in the book and what we have to do as leaders in construction is say look in your backpack or look in that person's personal issues and there's an iron skillet that probably weighed 25 pounds out of Herbie's backpack and give it to one of the faster kids, and then say, well, he's got like a 6-pack of soda in here. So they spread out that load, and no longer they took the load off of Herbie. Now he's like, my heart rate is going to lower and get back to normal.
Yeah.
And then you can take that same story into your own personal life, and you have to go seek help. And seeking help in a very masculine dominated industry, and we're about 88% men right now. So it's a very male populated problem that you have to say, I have a mental illness like I do, I have anxiety, and I have to go seek help. And if I can't seek help, somebody else has to see me struggling and they have to make me. So that's even harder because now I have introduced conflict. So, but we can talk about this and we can put posters up and we can have safety weeks all we want. But when we actually do the things that we talk about, that's when massive change happens. So
Mm,
I'm all about that. So it's a
yeah.
long story, but I'm very interested in that, and I think the nature of our work, it systematically injures us. If you don't believe me, go to and I love doing this. Go to like a gas station, like a quick trip that's here in the South, and at about 6:30 in the morning, and see how many energy drinks and coffees are being purchased. And I'm talking like a whole rack of energy drinks. And then you also notice that a lot of those people are wearing safety vests or construction, kind of attire, because it's true. But what's happening is, since a lot of our workers are sleep deprived and mentally and physically fatigued, they have to use substances to help them wake up. And then if you're also mentally fatigued and physically fatigued at the end of the day, you also will reach for substances like drugs and alcohol to help you relax. So that's why I'm interested in both ends of that spectrum. So thanks for asking.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, but you want to cover?
I do. I've been working on some content, and maybe I'll put it out here. But
Do it.
so I have a couple books in process right now, so I'll soon be published, but not yet, not just yet. But one of the subject matters I'm really interested in is and what you Felipe, my engineer, talks about, and a lot of people talk about, and I do as well. It's the concept of systems thinking. So you think of things in systems. So there's, for me in construction, three subjects, major subjects, and I'm curious to hear how you react to these. The first one is, and they're all kind of like SAT words, so I apologize. The first one is interdependence.
Mhm.
And if you're into building science and materials, this is incredibly true in a building or any kind of construction. Interdependence means you have at least two systems that are independent, like a mechanical system that heats the air up and cools it down, and heats the water up and cools water down. And then you have electrical. So not one of those systems. They're both independent systems, meaning they all work by themselves. Right? It comes from a utility and goes back out in the electrical system, but they also need each other to to be a complete building. So the thing about interdependence in construction, it's like you can't just like look at everything all at once at all times. That's impossible. Like, we don't have enough energy, right? So we're already depleted to begin with. So we have to look at the connections. So we do these studies where we take like a drawing and we color up a drawing, and I call them cartoons because they are. You just color them in. But when at the connection point where they meet, the two colors are very, very contrasting. Um, so that way your eyes immediately can see, oh, there's a connection right there. And now I don't have to search for it and waste a bunch of energy doing a bunch of searching. I can now see. So we do all kinds of studies and plans, and that's kind of why you see, when, like, if you're doing tact planning, like Jason Schroeder, you see these images that are very contrasting colored, like a layout or how they set up logistics on the thing, and it's that reason. It's the interdependence. So that's first concept. Second one I already talked about is feedback loops, and there's there's two types of feedback loops. The best type is the kind you design. The best kind is the kind you design. So even materials will tell you a feedback if, like, something sits out in the sun too long, it'll fade or get damaged, or if it gets wet, like insulation and moisture don't like each other. And how do you know? Well, it starts to get damaged. So if you know those symptoms, you can say, hey, when we go on a walk, and I'm in quality, so we do lots of visual inspection. There are certain things that we look for, and we'll actually make lists of these feedback loops. Say we look for puddles of water, we look for trash, we look for warping, we look at gauges, right? So you have to design those systems. Now, not having a design feedback loop also is a feedback loop because things will start to show up. So I use the concept like below grade waterproofing. And below grade waterproofing and quality is basically like you have to get it right the first time, because it's to fix below grade waterproofing is incredibly difficult and expensive, right? So the feedback from having either good quality or having poor quality in below grade waterproofing is two things. One, you should see water flowing where you want it to go. So we should, when we walk our job site, we should look at weeps, like where the water should specifically be going. And we should look for where it should not be. So if you don't have a design feedback loop, it will show up. And if you have poor quality, leaks appear. So like if you would see a wet spot in your concrete wall, or I would see, oh, the basement flooded after the 3 inches of rain. So those feedback loops, they will, I call them, it's like the Constitution. They are self-evident. So if you can actually exploit those feedback loops, meaning like if we know these specific things, that's what we're going to go look for. And if we know what we're looking for when we go out there, we walk with purpose. And it's so much more powerful when you walk with purpose. Otherwise, we're just walking around taking pictures. And then the third concept, and this is the most difficult one, is emergence. And emergence, it's like a tree. It's like a tree. So if you look at a tree, it has structure, it has leaves, it has roots, but it's also the way the sun is aligned with that tree. It'll grow in that direction. Or if there's a source of water more on one side than the other, the roots will go towards that. So you can't just look at any given thing as it is. You also have to look at the overall system and how it affects. So like a roofing system could be well installed and well designed, but because of thermodynamics, like it heats up and it cools down, that your roofing system might still sag, and then you have puddles. So the puddles that appear like your feedback loop aren't necessarily that it was a poor design or necessarily that the installers did a bad job. It just was, there's outside influences on things. And so we have to study relationships, again, between components, and not the components that we control. It's the
Sounds
components
like
like outside, right?
unknown
Yes.
outside influences.
Yes, but but those three things, when you think about it in a quality mindset, it's not always someone that did a poor job, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's because there was a hurricane, or there's serious weather events, or we didn't take into consideration traffic flowing in this direction. So it's not always a blame game. So that like when we study those things, we will utilize images. I call them structured images, but that's like an image with infographics. It's like going to the airport, or because you can go to airport in foreign countries where there's no English and still navigate because of infographics, meaning like there's arrows, there's highlights, there's patterns, there's some standardization even all over the world. So we can utilize those things to study emergence, and it becomes less complex. And when things become less complex and more simple, we're less afraid of them. And when we're less afraid of them, we're more, as human beings, more likely to confront that conflict. So what I mean by that is, like, if we're doing a constructability review and our building is lots of glass, but it's facing the south. And we know that that sunlight and south facing glass, it gets very bright. And if we just drew a picture saying, oh, it's south facing glass and sunlight, and if bounces off and it bounce off the floor, but there's an emergent thing happening here that we can now study, and there's no blame because we're just pointing at a piece of paper, or maybe it's a whiteboard, versus saying this is a poorly done design. Why would you ever put a building uh, uh, facing south? So the good people in Las Vegas and the good people in London know that story well. That there was a undesirable effect that became from not studied emergence with south facing big time high rise glass. So, but that's basically it. Those three concepts. What do you think there?
I think it's good. I think you identified some interesting things. The interdependence you said, and then the feedback loop, and then the emergence essentially is just there's just so many variables that are not known, right? Because you're pushing new materials, new
Yeah,
things. Essentially, you're taking it from a theory, right, or model to what happens in the field, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly it. And that's what it gives. I liked how you said model. So, and I was talking about reality capture before. So now, if we've done a bunch of interdependent studies in a 3D model, meaning like we have all of these different systems. We got ductwork, we got pipes, we got insulation, we got studs, we got drywall, we have finishes. And if we model those, now we understand the connections between them. So when we actually go out and walk the field, or actually when we go out and build it, we understand we more understand the overall system, and doing that, versus I'm just here to install the walls. I don't care about these pipes, and in fact these pipes are installed incorrectly. So that's a lot of that behavior we try to get away from, because we've done the layout ahead of time very accurately, so accurately we can even have a robot with a Sharpie draw the walls on the floor like a magical Roomba. But that's the dusty technology. But that's why those things are important, because of it understands the model, understands the interdependence of things. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you sharing your insight. That's a great book topic, and I'm looking forward to read it. But Thomas, thank you. I appreciate all the things you shared.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Again, I'm just interested in this, and one thing I like, I was telling you earlier, is I work for a very large company, and I can't reach everyone at all times. And I guess my ask is like, if you're interested in this, and it could be other companies even at an industry event, that it's okay to be like, that's interesting. Tell me more. And now I get to do this all the time. That I get actually get paid to talk about emergence at DPR, but we use very practical methods. But if I can't always bring these kind of vast topics into my day-to-day work, because it's very technical work and we have to be very specific on that thing, but like I love to talk about this off to the side, or when we're introducing a subject. And if somebody in their ride home wants to learn more, they turn over to specify a growth project, and they hear Thomas on here talking about feedback loops. It gives me a platform to engage with people, and it also gives people an excuse to come talk to me. And that's when we do that, when we actually interact on subject matter that's super positive, and it's not about baseball or the weather. We actually get better as an industry. And how do I know that? That's all I do now. That's all I do now is surround myself with people who are much smarter than me, and then I'm inspired by them. I go try something, and then like we do a little feedback loop. Be like, hey, check this out, and then we get better. So yeah, So let's
Well said.
keep
Thank
doing
you,
it. And
Thomas.
thank you for having this platform, because we need more and more of it. So
All right.
keep
Thank
doing
you
the
very
hard work.
much.